how did you get onto there? Like, how did you get to a final for the weirdest competition I think I have ever seen? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Minds of Media. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and today's guest is a wonderful human being who is one of the most talented individuals in the industry. She is a host and interviewer who has worked with CSGO, PUBG, Hearthstone, League of Legends, and more. She has her own podcast called My Life in Pixels. Please let me introduce Frankie Ward. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's a really nice introduction. Thank you. I'm blushing.
That's good. I'm doing my job well then. I feel good about that. So I'm excited to have you on the show. This is going to be fun and exciting, I think. It's going to be a different aspect. I don't know if there has been any really dive into what made Frankie today. So I'm kind of excited to get into it. You're like, oh God, I'm terrified, but that's okay. So I'm gonna start off really easy for you. There was this cool thing that I found that I never knew about until literally the other day. It's called the Glastonbury Festival.
Okay, right, yeah, okay.
And so you're like, oh my God, what is he going to? So I've never heard of this, and I didn't know it was the world's largest music festival, and I feel very hidden underneath the frickin' rock right now, but that's okay. Yeah. So it seems like it's a huge event, and it's been going on for 50 years plus, and I saw some pictures of you, and it looked like it had almost a Ren Fair aspect to it. Is that kind of true?
I have no idea what a Ren Fair is.
Okay, it's where you dress up in very almost medieval style dress, and sometimes
it really doesn't. Okay, no. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Blake. I'll stop you there. So Glastonbury is the largest festival of performing arts, and it's been going since I think maybe 60s, 70s. So no, 50 years. Going 50 years. And it's essentially a massive music festival, but it also has arts performances. It has a massive circus tent, for example. It's even got a cinema screen, but usually the emphasis tends to be around music. I mean, it has a hippie field called the Healing Field. It is an amazing gathering, and the reason that there are pictures of us in medieval costume is because to go to that festival, the tickets sell out like that. Yeah. So you can either get tickets from resales, or you can volunteer as a charity for Oxfam or WaterAid. Or you can work. So I work in a bar because I have a friend who's from that area who helps with the bar and getting staff for it each year. So there's 3 shifts a day. And so you dress up as someone medieval and work the bar, which was really fun because I just come off a really intense period of traveling. So it's really nice to hang out with my friends from non-gaming, sort of put my phone to one side for the most part and just serve drinks and go and dance to some music. It was great.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense because I knew it was a music festival. I was just very confused where the medieval dress kind of fit in anywhere there. Yeah, because it seems very out of place. So you were a bartender then?
Yes, I did work there. Yeah, it's the only bar I've ever worked in actually. It's really fun.
Okay, exciting. So obviously one of the things that you talked about when you went to this festival was there was a folk singer there who kind of touched you really deeply.
Yes.
And I cannot remember her name because I'm a terrible
host. It's called
Grace
Petrie.
Grace Petrie. So this is someone who touched you. Is music something that is really connected with you and something that kind of emotionally attaches to you and that you kind of express yourself through?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's watched my stream will know. Yeah. I sometimes get my guitar out when I'm waiting for CS matchmaking cues. I'm not the best guitar player in the world. I used to write songs and stuff. I used to work as a radio presenter and producer. So music's a huge part of my life and still is. I like some of the people I work with say I've got a soundtrack in my head at all times, which is true. So yeah, anyone can say a phrase and I'll get a song in my head. Most of the time.
I think that's a good thing, and I can relate to that on a personal level. You actually do have music videos of you playing and singing that are on YouTube that are very, very old. That if anyone wants to check out, they're actually really good. So my next, you're like, oh God, no, the embarrassing moments. The next thing I want to ask you,
I've removed so many of them from the internet. I used to play songs. I used to write a song and I put it on YouTube straight away just to kind of capture it, and I just put it there. So that's why a lot of those videos are there, and they're very rough and ready, basically.
I used to
just write it slow myself.
I used to have a YouTube channel dedicated towards music because I actually play music too. I'm not very good. You're actually good. I'm not. As much as you want to say you're not, you are. But hopefully no one ever finds that. I'm sure someday someone will. But I just feel like I can't take it down because it's part of like who I was as an angsty like young college student. Because 30s are approaching now, and so that was my younger years, and I don't want to forget them. So one thing I want to ask you is, did you ever think of making music a career? Because it's obviously something you're super passionate about, and it's something you super enjoy, and you wanted to be inside of the entertainment industry anyway. Was music a career path you wanted to take?
I wanted to be an opera singer when I was younger, when I was at school. So my plan was go to university, study something undergrad, and then do opera, classical singing postgrad, because the rate your voice matures. It's better to do it postgrad. You don't need to do it undergrad. But music and classical music has always been quite a closed off world. And so I got distinction on my grade 8 so this is a board of music exams. Sorry, my computer screen's just switched off. I'm just going to turn them on again. So there's something called the Associated Royal Board of Music, something like that. Mm-hmm. And you can do music exams. And so I went up to my grade 8, which is the final one, and I got distinction, which is the highest qualification you can get, or the highest mark you can get. And I didn't realize that would have qualified me for free singing lessons when I went to my uni, because my uni didn't really advertise that stuff. And so I stopped doing singing lessons because I couldn't afford them, and started writing and doing other kind of singing, I guess. So yeah, I stopped really thinking of music as a career. I never thought I would be, doing music for a living after that point, really.
Interesting. So kind of looking at growing up, where did you grow up in the UK?
I was born in South London, suburbs, and then I moved to Kent when I was about 7 or 8, which is it's kind of south of London, countryside, basically. Mm-hmm. So I lived in different places in Kent.
Okay, so kind of growing up, what was life like for Frankie? What did your parents do growing up?
So my dad's a journalist and still is. My mum's a teacher, and she now does casework in education. So they're sort of in the same sector still. And when we moved to Kent, I spent a year in a village, which was the same village as my primary school was. And then, so I guess that's like junior school for you guys in America. And then I moved after a year to a really rural village. And so I sort of started getting the bus on my own and stuff when I was like 9 years old and things. So I was kind of quite isolated in some ways, I guess. And so maybe that's one of the reasons that I was such a gaming addict. Although even when I lived in London and I was on an estate with more kids and like, by all accounts, had great friends at like infant school and stuff. So like kindergarten age. I always played video games, but they became even more essential to my life when I moved out to the countryside, because I couldn't go anywhere and I didn't know any kids in my village because I went to a different school to all of them. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I remember. It was all about music and video games. I used to tape the radio to the top 40 charts and play my computer, really. Play my PlayStation when I finally got one when I was 9. But yeah, I don't know. There's not really too much to say.
Okay, so one of the things I want to ask you about is you mentioned that you moved to small schools and that you didn't really know anyone because like your village area, you were actually going to a different school. Did that make making friends really hard for you?
Well, I'd been at the primary school that I was at when I was so we moved to a village. I went to a small town. We went to the school, or I went to the school in that town, and then I moved a few miles away. Yeah. So I was still at the same primary school. It's just that I wasn't going around to anyone's houses. They weren't coming around to mine and stuff because my parents worked. Mm-hmm. So I think in that sense, I sort of was removed. I did get bullied at junior school, so primary school, quite like really badly actually for a few years. That started when I was about 9, kind of finished when I was about 11. I kind of played my way out of it via football. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really in touch with anyone from primary school anymore.
So a lot of people get bullied, and actually in the States at least, it's kind of a big deal nowadays that people bring up. Well, and I remember growing up and it being pretty bad for me, and it actually had like some lasting damage on me where I had to go to therapy for like a substantial amount of time because of it, because of like my self-esteem and stuff like that. What was it like for you being younger and kind of going through that? How did you work through it?
I mean, I had a couple of friends at school at least. I think the hardest thing was my primary school was that, and I never had this at the infant school I went to. The infant school was great. The primary school, I don't really know where they targeted me. I did do a play which I got paid for in my second year of that school, so year 4. And so I spent a lot of time out of school going to London and being in theatre. But I don't think that really marked me out as different. But my school, for me, I was a stain on their reputation because I was having this issue. And there was one point where they found a couple of boys had written this in this notebook. They'd written a gazillion names for me because they had a name they called me, which I'm not going to say what it was. But they'd written loads of variations on it, like 50-something variations.
Wow.
And that book got confiscated. They had evidence. And I remember we were taken to this tiny like cupboard, which was our music room. And I remember the head teacher yelling at the boys and then yelling at me. I remember I was told off. I remember being told off. And that was such a strange thing. And I found a letter years later in this like chest, which my parents bunged loads of things in, like paperwork or just stuff. And there was this letter that was written to the school, and it was basically saying there wasn't a problem when there was. So my own school did not want to do anything about it. And it was a sexist school as well, like in the sense that boys' achievements were so much more when we did school plays and stuff. I remember one school play, it was either year 3 and year 4 1 year, year 5, year 6, the other, and it would alternate. So you do 2 while you're at the school. And the plays are always like male stories, male characters and things like that. Dick Whittington, like something called Sir Spencer and a dragon called Horace or something like that. And they didn't do auditions really. But they did auditions for the first one I did when I was 9. They didn't do auditions for the year 5, year 6 play. They just cast people. So in the year 4 play where I got to audition, I got the biggest part for a girl in that play, which was the cook in Dick Whittington. The love interest had 4 lines. I had a scene. And then the following year I was the tail of the dragon, which kind of cemented my status in that school, or what I was to the teachers, which was just no one. They just wanted rid of me. And so I took my 11 plus, which is an exam you can take to go to grammar school in Kent, and everyone else was going to go to the local comp that had a grammar stream for 2 years before people then took an exam to go to a 13 plus school. Yeah. So a school for kids 13 and up. So I took both, and I was successful in both. And I left that school. I took a 2-hour commute to get to the school in a big town, like the county town of Kent, place called Maidstone. And one other person from my school did go there, but we're in different forms, so we didn't really associate. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I went to a completely different school to all those people and became so much happier for it. Like my school, my secondary school that I went to was amazing. I loved it so much.
So, like you mentioned, like wanting to escape and actually using education. I actually tried to do something similar. I think I was like 16 or 17, and like I was getting picked on, and I couldn't. My parents are divorced, so what I actually ended up doing was moving in with my dad. But what I was trying to do was actually graduate literally a year earlier than I needed to. I was trying to like mass out all my credits, and I remember thinking this, like, how do I escape from this? And this like education being a viable solution at the time. Like, oh, if I just literally finish all of my stuff, I can just graduate early and I will never have to see these people ever again. And it's kind of interesting how we have almost like a similar, you switched schools completely to this other area. Did you ever bring it up to your parents, and did they ever like talk to you about it, or was it something that you kind of kept hidden because you were scared to or avoided to?
Well, my parents knew I was bullied. I think what we probably should have done is taking me out of that school and put me in the primary school in my village. But I think, and that was being rebuilt, the school like moved into a different building while I was in primary school. But the thing was, I think they were oversubscribed. Like there is a problem with like not enough places in schools in people's local villages and stuff. So I don't know if it would have even been an option, to be honest. But I think if I had maybe asked my parents to move schools, it might have happened. I didn't push for that kind of thing, and I don't think my parents ever thought to suggest it. So you know, we got through it. In my final year, in like so it was year 6, sorry, when I was 11 or so, it stopped. Just, I don't know, I just remember it stopped. I started playing football, and it wasn't so bad anymore. But I don't know why it stopped, but it kind of did.
So I actually have a couple, like there's a flow of questions coming inside of my head. So one of the questions I want to ask you is, you're definitely, I would say, one of the figures for like almost like women's right in the gaming industry, where you talk about it all the time. Was this the first moment that something really bad had happened to you? Like being 11-year-old, like looking back, that this is the thing that helped kickstart like this wanting to stand up for other people who maybe can't stand up for themselves?
Thanks. You know, I don't think so. I think, although I've always had that sense, like when I went to my primary school, maybe that was when I saw it. Maybe I was inspired by the Spice Girls, I don't know. But I was very acutely aware that the boys at my primary school were treated differently to the girls. Very, very aware. Because I could see, like, I had an amazing teacher in year 3. My first year at my primary school was amazing. I loved my teacher. It was great. I used to stay in the classroom at lunch break and write and just like really push myself in that sense. But yeah, maybe that's when it was. I'm not sure. I'd say, like, I do talk about women's things. I don't talk about it all the time. Yes. I think but because I do, then people associate that with me, and then people think that oh, she's gonna like go full feminism on me all the time. And actually I don't all the time, but I write about it. And the reason I write about it is because I think then I can put it into better words. Occasionally, like, I tweet something and then I'm like, oh no, this is not nuanced enough, so I should write about it instead. So that's what I do. I normally try and take that to my blog. But, you know, sometimes I do get frustrated and I just like vomit on Twitter, but I'm trying not to do that anymore. I've done it once or twice, right?
I don't know if it's that you say it all the time, but if you just look at kind of like the noise out there and the people who are talking versus not, and who have, like, I think a platform to stand on, I think that's probably why people do that, is that they're like, oh, someone's actually talking about it, and there's so little of everyone else talking about it that because you have a platform, I think it stands out more. I do not think it's wrong, though. I will say that.
Okay, thanks.
So I think that what you were doing is quite admirable.
Oh, thank you.
So, and I think that one of the biggest things about you is that you're professional. I think most of the time. Not everyone can be professional all the time, but I will say most of the time you are very professional in the way that you go about it. And I think that your blogs are actually wonderful, as I read through them all. So
thank you.
But kind of looking at that, you mentioned that getting into football was kind of better. You actually wrote a story in your blogs, actually, about football.
Yeah, I did, yes. Yeah.
And mentioning how there was still a discrimination that would happen. Like, you would never be passed to unless you kind of went out like that. So is it just that it was less aggressive and it was more passive, that this stuff was still happening to you?
Well, I didn't go to the football club or anything. Like, when I went to secondary school, we had boys in our sixth form, and that was great. I made friends, actually. Some of the people I still speak to now are from that group. But I hadn't been playing football like my whole life like they had. I played it on and off at primary school and things like that. And then I had 5 years where I didn't get to play it because we didn't do it at my school. Apart from, a kickabout occasionally, maybe in the park or something like that. So people were not going to pass me because I hadn't been playing as long as they had. So therefore they would rightly assume that I wasn't going to be as good as them. But I also learned that I had no fear because of that, because people underestimated me. So I just run at them and I get the ball. So that worked in my favor in a way.
Yeah. Kind of looking at it, another thing I kind of noticed inside of your blogs that you kind of talk about is, at least earlier on, not believing in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And having this, for mental health, I would call it self-esteem, having a very low self-esteem, at least at the time.
Yeah.
When did you kind of notice that? and it start to be through? Is that something that affected you kind of growing up because of like maybe some of this trauma that happened, or is it something that you noticed later on? Like, was it always there? Did it start progressing later on in life?
I had cracking self-esteem when I was at secondary school, but I loved that school. It's great. You know, I was surrounded by strong teachers, strong personalities, people who champion women. Like, it's great. Even when we had boys in my sixth form, yeah, I didn't have low self-esteem. I was like, felt good. When I went to uni, I studied drama. I did definitely not have the confidence in the sense of trying to join, like when we did assessments and things like that. Yeah. If I, like my last year, we had the option of doing performance or writing a play. And even though I didn't do the playwriting part of the course, I wrote a play partly because I needed to get out of Birmingham, where I went to uni, and start a job up in Newcastle in radio because I'd already accepted the job. So I literally needed something I could write and hand in.
Yeah.
But also because I felt too shy to ask anyone if I could be in their group. And I didn't do the drama societies. I did radio instead. So, but I knew I could act. I knew I was good at acting. I knew I could perform. We did one assessment where it was groups. There was 10 plays in one performance, and I got chosen to do a monologue. And I think it surprised everyone else I was in a cast with, because I was not going out there and I was not performing every term in a play. I wasn't doing that. But I'm quite introverted when it comes to that kind of thing, even though people don't see me as an introvert because they see me on camera all the time. Yeah. I can produce a performance. I can slip into someone else because I'm an empathetic person. So, or empathetic, I can never pronounce the word properly. So therefore, even though I think I am it, therefore I will, I can empathize with anyone and anything really. I do remember being at school and like having an interview for a house captain role. We had to do a vote and a house captain. I was never going to win Miss Congeniality and win the head student vote because that was with my peers. And it wasn't like I was the most popular girl in school or anything like that. But I was fine with who I was. But I remember having an interview for this house captain role, which I got. And someone was like, why are you the person for this job? And I said, I think I'm this. And they went, I'm going to stop you there. Do you think or do you know? And I've always remembered that. But when I went and was a radio producer up in Newcastle, I had this, we had this MD who was, or CEO. Well, he wasn't CEO, sorry, no. He was the managing director of the radio station because the CEO, it was a wider group. And I got told, because I'd done internships and things like that, so I'd learned a lot from working at a place called Channel 4 in the UK in terms of like producing websites and things. So as well as producing show and hosting a specialist show, I was also kind of taking charge of the website and trying to get that up and running and things. And I got told by this guy in this one-on-one that I pissed everyone off, that I was really arrogant, that I was this, that, and the other. But I was good at my job. And that led to 9 months of basically being destroyed by this company, not by that guy, by other people. There were some nice people who worked at that radio station as well. Yeah. But then there were some awful people, including they brought in the head of programming guy. I can't even remember. He was exec producer. And he was, I think he was scared of me. I was 21. It transpired that I was producing the flagship show on the station. It was the afternoon show. I didn't know it was a flagship show because normally it's breakfast, but in our radio station, its direct competitor's flagship show was the afternoon show. So therefore, the show that I was producing was the first show to go live because we used to voice track, i.e. pre-record the show. It was extended by an hour a week. It had all these things that were on paper, like it was a successful show, right?
Yeah.
And yet, I was the girl who hadn't done the radio course. I was the girl, I don't know, who went out and did perform with bands, or like I spent a lot of time I made friends in the kind of the music scene. I didn't know anyone. I just had an Xbox 360 for company when I moved up to Newcastle, really. But I would also speak out when something was, when things were not kind of right in the way that things were being treated, like, oh, there's too many women on the playlist or whatever, because more women, you could submit your music to be on the radio station because it was about new music. And I would if someone said no one would ever say there's too many male voices on this playlist. That doesn't happen in music radio. No. And yet when we had a lot of women who submitted great tracks and they got playlisted that week, it would be like, oh no, we have too many women. We need to make sure we put some new men in there as well, even if their music's not as good. This track can't be included because we need to make sure there's men as well. And I would speak out about that stuff. I'd be like, well, why are we in this mute radio show asking what the singer looks like why aren't we asking about what the whole band looks like? I went into that radio station kind of being fearless about that. And then I spent 9 months there. And then the executive producer basically managed to get my contract terminated, which meant because I'd been there less than a year, they couldn't fire me because I hadn't done something wrong. Yeah. But because I've been there less than a year, I didn't have certain rights. And I remember this exec producer, like they basically hid everyone in a room, got me to come in before my shift was meant to start, got me to sit down there, told me they were getting rid of my job. Then I went upstairs, sent a couple of emails to my producer of the radio show that I did because I had some interviews that needed to be cancelled. And I also had already pre-planned 4 weeks of shows for the show that I produce in the afternoons. Yeah. So I needed to just like write an email about that. And then I left. And then this exec producer comes after me and goes, you forgot your coat. And that was the last thing he said to me. And the bastard tried to add me on LinkedIn. It's like, why are you ignoring everything that you did to me? So I totally like dissolved during that 9 months. I became a completely different person, and I was in the opposite side of the country to where my family were and where my friends were and everything. So it was a difficult time. I definitely have never worked anywhere like that since, thank God. But it does mean that I'm acutely aware when something is wrong and I shut it down.
So I have to ask you a very non-professional question.
Okay.
So this individual, have you ever like went back to them and be like, oh, look at me now, motherfucker? Because I'm pretty good at being professional, but I can tell you if I was in your situation, there's a lovely part of me that looks like a juicy cheesecake that would be delicious to eat in front of me, and it would be kind of hard not to be like, what's up, motherfucker? Like,
well, yeah, well, I feel like I don't need to. I mean, when I did, I got a job at the BBC in radio comedy, and when that happened, basically it happened, the job offer on this pretty much the same day as this digital radio station lost its digital license and went online only. So the thing was, I knew that the people who had done that to me were not going to amount to the things that I could amount to. And because you can't, unless you treat people as you'd want to be treated, how are you ever going to be liked and respected? You're just not. Like, I think someone who has agency, who gains power by denying information, because I could go into lots of things about what they did to me over the 9-month period, but I won't. Like, you're just, I mean, if you don't have that on your conscience, then fair play to you. You are a stronger person than I am, let's say, but I'm doing really well. So, and I started doing well as soon as I left. I lost my job. I signed on at the job centre, and 2 weeks later I walked into Channel 4 as a producer, and I doubled my salary almost overnight. Yeah,
that's pretty impressive. Cool. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I needed to leave. I'd started looking for jobs anyway. I didn't want to leave certain people up in Newcastle because I had settled in, and I did have a life there, and I looked for jobs up there, but they weren't the right jobs. Like, yeah.
That's fair. So you mentioned kind of earlier on going through high school, and you wanted to be an opera singer, and so you wanted to pick a kind of it sounded like a theater and arts degree is what you ended up going with, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So was there any like decision of, oh, okay, we need to go to this school? Because it's funny you mentioned being an opera singer yet not singing throughout like university at all, or picking some degree path that might still have you singing like performance arts or something like that. What was kind of the decision like back in high school to be like, okay, I'm going to go for a theater and arts degree rather than like a music performance degree?
Well, the music would have been MA. It would have been postgrad. So I was planning on doing that. But my undergrad, I wanted to do something I enjoyed. Birmingham was an academic course. So there was some performance. But if you performed, you had to write an essay about it. So for me, it was a Bachelor of Arts degree. And it was something that I felt like I could enjoy doing for 3 years. I did audition for one drama school and I had sort of an afternoon callback, and that was in a musical theatre thing. And I know exactly where I went wrong in the audition because I was having my range tested and I moved from my chest voice into my head voice too quickly. So literally I know exactly what I did wrong in that audition. But also I didn't think it was necessarily for me, drama school, not undergraduate anyway. I found it when I went to uni as well. I was with a lot of people who were from different backgrounds to me, like quite privileged backgrounds. Yeah. For me, like, not that I'm from a deprived background, and I went to a grammar school, so I didn't pay money for my school, but I did go to selective education. But I instantly didn't necessarily feel like 100% at home. Yeah. Like, people on my course were really nice, but like I'm not really in touch with anyone I did my degree with. I am in touch with people I did radio with and I lived with and things like, but yeah, I'm not really communicating with those people anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand and relate to that. I remember because I originally wanted to do like music production and doing like recording stuff, and I remember like all of these different people, and I'm like no one. I do not have the experience any of these people have. I do not fit in with any of these people. Which is an interesting thing, not fitting in and being in that area. And you're searching for something to latch onto. And for you, that latch on sounded like it was radio. How did you end up finding radio and taking the approach to get to radio?
I was at a meeting for the 5 different drama societies at the university. And next door was a radio society meeting. And my friend was in there and I wanted to be in there. But it was too late. And then a week later, I was walking through the Guild of Student Union, and I walked around the corner and suddenly I was in the bit between the newspaper and the radio, and I turned right into the radio and I managed to get a show. And then after 2 weeks, we went off air because we were a fire hazard, because the boiler was in the radio station, but we didn't have air conditioning. And so we went off air, and I bought a cheap dictaphone that didn't even have a USB out. You'd have to sort of record through the audio jack to get the audio. And I went around Birmingham and I didn't tell any of the bands that I was street teaming for and then asking for interviews from that the radio station wasn't on. I just went off and I got interviews with them. I didn't really have anyone to place those interviews, but I went to all these gigs and then I got spotted by some local bloggers, because it's 2008 now and there's 2007, 2008. So there's a kind of hyper local, it's called, blogging scene emerging in Birmingham. And I got asked to start doing stuff online, and I couldn't get work experience in radio. I tried really hard. I ended up becoming what did I do for programming? I was like programming manager, and then I ended up becoming the manager of the radio station itself. But before I turned 20, I'd been asked to manage 2 radio stations, a community radio station, which was too intimidating for me at the time, and a student one. I did the student one because I would enjoy it more. And yeah, it was kind of, I found some amazing friends there. It was really, really great. Even though we didn't produce anything I was proud of.
That's understandable. It's interesting you mentioned this. Like, when I ask you, like, how do you get into it? It's interesting how we take a retroactive look, because one of the things that people always ask for, at least esports, is how do I get into it? It's like probably one of the most common questions. I think almost everyone who's been in the scene, like when I was working with LA Gliders, people would ask me all the time, like, how do I get into it? And there really isn't, I feel like, a good answer to that. Like, there's not, I can give you a step-by-step guide. It's, you need to find some way to get in that is unique, because anything that happened 3 or 4 years ago most likely won't work now. Just because of the way that, like, everything evolves. And you even mentioned, like, with radio, it's kind of the same thing. You were going to different events, doing just random interviews, when you got spotted with something that literally didn't have a USB output at the time to record things in. So, yes,
I was, and I was mostly writing reviews of gigs as well in my first year or something. Like, that was, and then the reason I got picked out for the radio station, I recorded my first national radio show at the age of 20 was in my bedroom at uni, was because I wrote a blog about it. So I started blogging my own blog, and initially I think I was mostly writing about music and things. And then I wrote a blog about something called BBC Introducing, and this guy was setting up this new music radio station, and it was a competitor to Introducing, what they did, and a station called Six Music, which is kind of alternative music in the UK, run by the BBC. And he found my blog and then thought, oh, this is a like-minded person, and then got me on board. Didn't pay me. But again, we've kind of moved on from those people. But yeah, so it was about putting myself out there and just doing things. And like I advise people just do it, like stream, blog and things like that. And once you start doing it, then you'll find the right people, or you'll have something to reach out to people with.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is just it sounds like such a meme, like just do it, but it is like you need to go out there and start at least honing your craft. You need to start doing it, and you have to realize that things aren't working. And I think that's like one of the bigger things, is like realizing what I'm doing isn't working. How do I change it so it's better? And always kind of being in that mindset, because I'm imagining even still now, you're at a very successful career, I would say, and you're probably still looking at like, how do I do this better than I did before? Like, what can I always do to improve?
Yeah, sure.
Which I think is a unique way of looking at it. So getting into radio, did you ever think about being like a radio disc jockey? Like, was that ever a thought? Like, I just want to be like a big one. Like I'm talking like Howard Stern, like getting on something like that, or doing anything like that.
When I was 9, maybe I would have loved to be on Radio 1. But when I mean, I would have liked to, I think, when I was younger. But the thing was, if I'd known I had about that I wanted to definitely do radio, then I would have gone to a different university, because there are universities in the UK that win all the student radio awards, that have money, that have the proper studio, that have everything they need. We had a mixer which had a hole in the middle, and one day someone caught was eating in the studio, which they shouldn't be doing, and they dropped a bit of Kit Kat foil in the middle of the desk, and it started smoking. So yeah, we didn't have the equipment. And also the university didn't support us. It's outrageous. Like they had a state-of-the-art studio in the belly of one of the main buildings in University of Birmingham, and we did not have any access to it because they just charge it. They'd rent it out, they charge it. They never ever offered to let us use it. The student union was technically separate from the university, even though it's had its own building on the campus. But they had no interest in supporting us. I had a complete nightmare with the university while I was trying to do this radio station, and it really soured my opinion of the University of Birmingham. And for me personally, I do believe in higher education. I think it's really important, and I think everyone should have access to it. I don't think that people should be charging as much as they're currently charging for it, because it's an absolute abomination. You don't get value for money, and all these universities, or at least some of them, are interested in is finding more money. I just think that, if I knew that radio was a thing, I should have gone to somewhere like Leeds, for example. I just should have gone to somewhere that was actually going to support it. And maybe I would have gone into like a fully fledged presenting radio career, but I didn't need to do that. I'm fine with the fact that I didn't. I've still worked at radio stations, and I've worked with the biggest radio stations in the UK in terms of digital work. So, and I worked on Radio Comedy, which is the biggest producer of comedy in the world. When I worked for them, they produced about 180 hours a year. They were prolific. So I got to work with people that I listened to growing up, which was insane. So I got there in the end, but in terms of on air, I just never thought I would get to. And I never thought I'd get to what I'm doing now, so yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, because I will at least use me. It's one of the things that I at least have is I have, I think I like to call it grit. It's the idea that I'll never accept failure. It's like, no matter, I will make it there if it takes me literally 50 years. Like, that's kind of like how, which I don't know if is good or bad either. It's like, I'll do whatever I have to do to eventually get to where I need to be. But I don't ever have that self thought of like, oh, I'll never make it there. Why do you think that you have that? Like, I can't believe that I'm doing this now, or is it just so far away from, like the norm? Like, why is it that you have that thought about yourself?
Well, because I think in the UK, at least, like being on screen and stuff like that, when you look at people who do, for example, entertainment presenting and stuff like that, they come from model agencies or they come from famous families. They're not people like me. They're really not people like me. So I think that sense, in terms of, I mean, I also, to be honest, I needed to find what it was that I would talk about or what I could bring to something, because there are lots of people who can talk about music.
Yep.
So I wasn't unique in that regard. But also when I moved to London, I needed to be able to live in London.
Yeah.
Can't do that. And I couldn't suddenly just quit my job and go, right, I'm gonna be on screen, because there was nothing for me to be on screen about. Like, I worked in comedy for a year and a half, and I was very involved, like very much kind of, I guess, embedded in it. Like, I knew a lot of the up and coming UK comedians, some of them very established now. And I did some interactive videos with them. I did a couple of internal things presenting at BBC, which was like very much us putting it together and just putting out on like the BBC Academy, like, you know, media education platform. No one in the BBC had any interest in me presenting. It didn't matter how much I shoved myself in front of them. There was no interest whatsoever. I tried pitching some gaming stuff even to the youth platform, BBC Three. Nothing, because it wasn't what they were looking for. And so but my job was also, you know, it allowed me to live, and I bought my first place like part owned, so I had subsidized rent. So as housing association, part of my flat, and I own the rest when I was 23. So I couldn't really abandon my mortgage. So I've always been very like financially trying to make myself secure as possible and independent from everyone else. And so I just never, you know, put myself out there to do it. And then, you know, the story is that I moved to Twitch, started hosting on the side, and then job got cut. And I was suddenly in a position where I did have savings, and I was living at my boyfriend's flat. So he was also really cool about it, and said, like, if you can't afford to pay me rent 1 month, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I never didn't pay him. But I didn't know that I was going to get booked for things. It was really scary. But I'm so glad I obviously made that leap. But I had to get to a position where I felt like I was safe enough to do that. And I learned a lot of life lessons on the way. So I think that I was more ready to do what I'm doing now than I would have been when I was 25, 23. You know, I was ready to take the opportunities that I was given and sell them and do them well.
One of the things I want to ask you is this kind of seeking independence and kind of going out there, like owning like even part of your own house, or you owned your own house. I'm just going to say you owned your own house for the sake of convenience, because I've never heard of like owning maybe condos in the United States, but we have so many like we're so huge and there's so many houses across, and I grew up in a very small area, so it's very uncommon. But
this is a 1-bedroom flat in like East London, but
so it's like owning a condo, I think. It's probably similar to the United States. Even still, though, being 23 and owning your own place is kind of insane. You mentioned school debt, and I'm just thinking back to like the $120,000 that I have in school debt, and I'm like crying inside. But like that's kind of unheard of in the States, of like owning your own house at 23. What made you kind of seek out, I need to have this fiscal. Is it fiscal? Fiscal,
yeah.
Yeah, fiscal. I think it's fiscal. I always mispronounce it. Kind of like you mispronounce everything. That is the one word I cannot really say ever. Financial responsibility. You wanted this financial responsibility. What kind of made you seek that I need to be like to the point where you're thinking I need to buy a house at 23?
I wanted to live on my own. I really wanted to live on my own, and I was rehearsing for the Olympics opening ceremony in East London, and across the road there were these flats being built. And I wanted to look into shared ownership anyway. I live with some great people. I've lived with some terrible people. I didn't want that anymore. I didn't want that stress. I wanted my own space. I could be creative in my own space. I could use it as my gym. I could, like, you know, just exercising on the living room floor, right, without anyone complaining. I could play guitar again. I could do all these things. I wanted that freedom. And I worked out I could do it for relatively little money, to be honest. I found a flat that was so like cheap then that when I did sell it, I made about 30 or 40,000 from it, which I used to pay off my student loan. The first thing I did when I sold the flat was pay off my student loan and buy some adjustable weights. That's what I did, and I put the rest of my savings. And then now me and my boyfriend, we bought a place that we're renovating. So I've always been responsible financially in that sense. And because my rent was subsidized and because my mortgage wasn't much, it was cheaper for me to live on my own in this 1-bedroom flat than it was for a lot of my friends in house shares. Like it was financially, it was actually one of the cleverest decisions. I didn't realize it was clever at the time, that good a move, but it really was, because I made money out of it, and I also saved a load of money when I was living there for the 5 years I was there.
I mean, I guess that makes. I'm happy that you are so smart. That most like that's like, I'm thinking back now, like maybe I should have bought a house when I was 18. Like maybe that would have been the smart. Actually, me and my girlfriend.
Oh no, but don't tether yourself. That's the thing.
That's
you
true.
know, I tethered myself. So what would I have done if I'd been in a house share? I could have just moved house and tried to find some cooler people to live with, right? So I don't regret living on my own. I loved it, but if I'd lived with other people, maybe that would have been cool as well. Maybe I still would have saved up money, and you know, my life would have been probably very different. So you know, that was one of those big decisions I made in my life, and I don't regret it. But I think that, hey, maybe I would be doing what I'm doing now a bit earlier, or maybe I don't know, met other people and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those crossroads moments.
So I do want to take a kind of sidestep, okay? One of the things that I found out about you, which this is by far one of the coolest things I think I got to watch about you, which you have a lot of stuff out you. The Ready, Steady, Squeeze Cheese Final.
Oh, right, the formula thing.
That is amazing.
Yes. My favorite thing is my face when they're announcing the winner, because mine was so disastrous that my face is just a picture. It's so good. It's so good. I had so much fun doing that.
How did you get onto there? Like, how did you get to a final for the weirdest competition I think I have ever seen?
So we had an away day. We went across the river from Gateshead into Newcastle when I was at the radio station. And we were looking at sponsor opportunities and all that kind of stuff. And we looked at the local Metro Radio, I think it was, like the local, one of the local commercial stations, and what they were doing. And they had this competition for sending in a recipe for using Primula cheese in a recipe. And I did quite a lot of cooking at the time. There's quite a lot of recipes on my blog. And we were sat there and people were laughing about it. And I was sat there going, I could do that. So I sent in the recipe, I lose my job, and then I get an email like the next day being like, congratulations, you're a finalist in next week's Primula Ready, Steady, Squeeze thing. So, and one of the lowest points of my life, I then spend a week, like I suddenly go and I do this bloody cheese challenge. And like, if I'd won, that money would have been so valuable, but at the same time, it was fine that I didn't. But it was such funny timing. It was a really fun day. I had a lot of fun with my terrible things where I accidentally spilled balsamic on the wrap. So rather than just trying to get a bit of kitchen towel and brush it off, I decided to just dot it everywhere because I'd given up by then. It was so bad.
I loved watching that though. I will say cooking shows have taken bounds and leaps.
I mean, this was an online promotion. It was literally an online video. That's why it's like on video and that's it. But it was a lovely little boost at the time.
So, and kind of the reason that I bring this up is one of the things you actually mentioned in your blog is kind of when you were 15, okay, and one of the things you had mentioned was that you actually got hurt skating, and the fear stops you from trying new things. And actually, the quote that I have is, "I'm just a girl," rings out in your head, as in like you can't do things because you're just a girl. How did you move to a point where you're confident enough in yourself to where you're literally submitting things to something like a cheese final, which is very much out there, and if you got it, you were going to be on an online production? How do you make that bridge from being a 15-year-old who isn't confident to someone who's like, I'm gonna go on a fucking cheese final?
But no one's going to underestimate you for being a woman making some stuff with cheese, right? That was not. Also, like the thing was, I wasn't. It was for me. That wasn't a big thing. That was just a local radio thing, and it was £1,000 at the end of it. So I just submitted. Like I didn't think about any consequences of that because I just didn't think I would get asked to do it anyway. So I didn't. I put myself forward for things when I was younger, especially. Yeah, and I still do put myself forward for things. I think I just don't necessarily for example, with my job right now, like when I did PC Gaming Show at E3 in 2018, like that show changed my life. And yeah, I was terrified before I did it, but I knew I could do it because I've been hired because I knew I could do it. Yeah. And I was hired for being myself. I was hired from doing this half-stone, like very bantery, like production where I was shamelessly myself. And so I've been hired for that. So I knew I could do it. And because no one was telling me I couldn't. My weakness is kind of listening to people and going, yeah, oh, I'm not the strongest at that. Oh, okay, right. So I'm not gonna be the best. Whereas with other things, I'm like, well, actually, no, I know I'm good at this. So I have like, I have certain things where I'm like, oh, I'm not, and I have certain things where I'm like, yeah, I am. Like with the skating thing, I started later than other people. I started with no fear, and then once the swirl bow happened, I was really terrified of hurting myself. And like, my life revolved around skating, but my life wasn't skating, if that makes sense. Like my social life revolved around it. Like, there was what I was doing every weekend and all those kind of things. There was a lifestyle that came with it. Yeah. But I was terrified of hurting myself because the doctor mentioned about the hematoma and dying and things like that. So that's why I didn't put myself out there even more. I would say. And I don't know, I wish I had pushed myself harder, but I couldn't practice anywhere where I lived. I had very little time and very limited places to practice, basically.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned other people when they kind of say you can't do this, that's the stuff that you kind of attach to. How does that work with stuff like, I'm going to use Twitch chat as an example, which has been predominant. I don't want to say predominantly, that's the wrong word. It has a lot of negative aspects to it, being on live broadcasts and people talking or forum posts, or you've mentioned like, I think it's HTLV. Is that the acronym?
HLTV.
HLTV, there we go. You mentioned that's been kind of, how do you handle that kind of negativity that's coming at you sometimes?
I changed their minds. Like when I did PUBG, DreamHack Austin, it was the biggest desk I'd done at the time. Like the third desk I'd ever done. And the first one with a live audience being there. And I know that audience. I worked at Twitch for nearly a year and a half. Yeah. I am part of that audience. So therefore, I pay a lot more attention to Twitch chat than other people do, I'd say, in my business, my line of work. And the reason I do is because I was a producer, and so I want the audience to be happy. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do everything that they do, especially on my own Twitch channel, because that's my space. So if people don't want to be in my space, or they don't like how my space was run, not trying to hark back to actual my space, then they don't have to be in it. Whereas when I'm doing a show, that show is for the audience. So I do pay attention to them. But I also, with some cases, I know that people don't like change and they're not going to like me straight away. And then I just have to hope that the production like me and want me to do what I'm doing, or want to give me feedback to make me do what they want me to do. And then, you work on that relationship, and then eventually the audience goes, oh yeah, this person's part of this. Like, why wouldn't they be here? They change their minds. And you just have to be patient. And you have to give them time. You have to give yourself time as well. It's like a two-way thing.
So I have a philosophical question is probably what it ends up being. Do you think that it's that they don't like you, or they just are not used to something different being there and they're waiting to kind of like normalize to it? Like, do you think it's an actual we don't like it? Because I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're hiding behind an internet screen. Because in general, I think that if people are face to face, they are not nearly as mean as they can be on the internet. And so I think a lot of it has to do with, oh, this is something different, we don't like it, because human beings in general don't like change.
Well, human beings want connection, and if you have a common enemy, or like, and that can be, I don't like this person. Oh my God, I don't like them either. Oh, now we're friends. Or, you know, someone's listening to me, someone's agreeing with my point, or I can agree with their point.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be a mixture of both. Not everyone's going to like me. And, you know, that's one of the hardest things, even as an adult, it's hard to accept that not everyone's going to like you, especially when they're people you know in person. It's easier when it's someone you don't know on the internet.
Yes.
But I also think people just had to get used to me as well, because I think I was quite different, especially in the way I interview people. People were not used to that. And also people didn't know me. They didn't know me for that scene. Like, take Counter-Strike, for example. Most of the talent in Counter-Strike are very much known for Counter-Strike. They were players, or they've been doing it for years, or they were journalists, are journalists. Like, you know, they've been living this scene for longer than the audience has. And then I came in, and I wasn't that person. That, you know. So for the people that have been professional players and now they're analysts, or you know, working, you know, managing a team and interviewing and now doing a desk, those people are representations of what the audience would like to be, because they had this dream career in Counter-Strike and they've carried it through their lives doing something within that game. I haven't. So I played Counter-Strike when I was 16 briefly, like really briefly, and I wanted to play it, but I didn't have anyone to play with. You know, my boyfriend went to LAN Center with his friends and didn't want me to go with him. And like, I could have done more, but at the time I hadn't had a chance to fall in love with the game yet. So why would I go out and do more? Yeah. So yeah, that is why. But I now have had that chance to fall in love with Counter-Strike, because I watched it before I was working in it, and for me, Counter-Strike I held on this really high pedestal. Like, I'm not going to get to work in Counter-Strike because like the best people I know work in Counter-Strike, and they're the best. Like, because I knew Machine and Henry, for example, before I started working in it. So I never thought I'd get to do it. And now I'm getting to do it. It's a bit like with Twitch. When I joined Twitch, I didn't watch Twitch. I didn't stream on Twitch. And then I literally became part of it. And Counter-Strike now, you know, I play Counter-Strike. I mostly stream Counter-Strike. I dream in Counter-Strike. You know, it's my whole world. It's a huge part of my life now. So, you know, you can, and I think the audience know that now as well. Yeah. They know that I want to be here, that I am one of them now, and I want to make the effort, just want to keep doing it. And I think that's one of the loveliest things about this audience, is that they do change, and they are flexible, more flexible than some of them would probably admit. And so it's collaborate. You know, I'm really proud. I'm really happy to be here and part of it.
So what kind of stuff do you read from Twitch chat and you're like, oh, I need to change this about myself? Like, how do you take that information? How do you filter it in a way that is actually useful?
I don't. No.
Okay.
No,
okay. I was gonna say.
No, God, no. I'll take notice of things they like, but what are the things that Twitch chat are saying? Normally, they're in my Twitch chat. They're backseat gaming me about like how my recoil control, or like move your mouse down. I know how to do recoil control. Like, you know, it's just aim for the head. No, the reason I'm not aiming for the head is because I know that I'm less precise like that. So I'd rather tag. I'd rather tag a bitch and then go down. You know, there's certain things. I'm like, now I'm using I'm using SG. I'm using the Krieg and I'm using AUG. So I'm going to be scoped and I'm going to be clicking heads if I can. But like, when Twitch chat says stuff to me, like backseats me, it does tilt me, and like I have to actually like look away. I have to engage less with it to be able to play well. And that's a shame, because I love communicating with Twitch chat, and my community that have been with me for, one of them has been subscribing for 30 months and was watching before I got a sub button, right? So I've been streaming for a scary long period of time now, about 3 years. And in terms of in shows, for me, Twitch chat is lovely. It's a sign of progress, right? Because when I will pop into Twitch chat and I'll have a chat to them. If I'm watching a show from home because I want to watch the Counter-Strike, whatever, I'm not working an event, I might say hey. If I'm doing a show when I can, especially in ad breaks, I'll pop in and I'll say hello. I want to check in on the community, see how people are doing, thank them for their time because they're actually watching, and they're spending their time with us. And just like temperature check. It was funny watching the show match from IEM Beijing back because I wanted to watch it back to write an article about it and about that experience, and seeing chat's reactions and things like that, because you'd have a couple of naysayers who were like, oh, she's not even going to get killed, blah blah blah. And actually the ones who say that the most, I recognize their Twitch names now because they always do it
consistently.
It almost is weird to me that I actually recognize their usernames because they are so keen to do that. Yeah. So I realized I can get rid of those now. You can actually just mute user accounts. So I can get rid of those names. It's great. But it was interesting seeing people being encouraging, and they weren't even being like patronizing. Actually, it was quite funny. It was really nice actually. Seeing that people knew I was like playing on a team of Mandarin speakers, and I was playing against professionals, including a player who'd won a major. And they were actually like, for the most part, they were super cool about it. I wasn't expecting it at all. Like, it was just really nice. Yeah. I love this community so much. Like, it's just been a really exciting year for that sense. Like, getting to know a scene and feeling like I'm part of it is really, really, really cool. Love it.
I love Counter-Strike. Like I actually went to IEM in Chicago. I got dinner with Anders. Right. So actually the last 2 years I've actually been to Chicago because I lived really close to Chicago. The next time you go into Chicago, because I'm sure that there will be another CS event in Chicago.
I hope so.
You need to go to a place called the Purple Pig. Okay. It is it's a food recommendation because you like food. You need to go and eat there. Okay. And you need to, it's packed. You might have a wait. They do tapas.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, I can do tapas, yeah.
It is amazing. They're very known for having at least a 2-hour wait that you cannot pre-book. I'm telling you, it's worth it. As someone who has eaten everywhere, you should eat there and enjoy it. If you haven't had Pequot's pizza, you should do that too, because that's just, you need to do it. But
I had the deep dish pizza at a place where you had to wait for ages, but then they brought my order wrong and they put a meat layer in it and I don't eat meat. So that was quite tragic. I ended up just having fried cheese for dinner because it was going to take 45 minutes for them to remake it.
Yeah. So there's a place
I went to a place.
There's a place called Pequot's that is very busy, but it's actually not deep dish. It's actually a pan pizza. But everyone calls it deep dish. It looks like deep dish, but it is. It has caramelized crust on the end. Anyways. Okay. Cool. Food recommendations later, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
But I love Chicago, and I think it's one of the best food places probably on the planet, to be honest. It's I think better than LA, and I lived in LA for a year. I was not as impressed with LA, except for their Korean barbecue. So actual questions that are pertinent. You mentioned kind of coming into hosting and being very different from like Machine or like everyone else. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, did you pull any techniques from your father, who is actually a journalist? Did he teach you how do you start to interview, or how do you get interviews there that are going to be really good? Because you mentioned not being a journalist, but growing up, both my parents were therapists, and I definitely picked up everything and led into my career path, at least temporarily. Did you pick up anything from your journalist father?
I don't think so. Maybe subconsciously. I mean, my dad was good at telling stories, but no, never really. No, I was always really independent from my parents in that sense. I don't really think they taught me anything like that. I did BBC interview training once as like doing this work placement internship thing when I was 19. And we basically repeated the same interview training in a job once I properly worked at BBC. So probably I did it last when I was about 25, 26, I think I last did that interview training. Very, very good interview training. Yeah. Very much more, I mean, Paxman, who is a journalist, very more news aligned, I would say, but also about making people feel comfortable as well and things like that. So I think that was a key thing, really. And working in broadcast and things like that, you pick up from watching other people. I think the same thing when I'm watching stuff like X Factor or like, American Idol kind of thing. I would always, or even Strictly, because I did a little bit of ballroom dancing at uni. I am very like, I look at the details. And I pick up when they're doing something not quite right. I'm really bad when I'm listening to singers because I don't have the best technique anymore, to be honest. But I can tell when someone else has got bad technique, and so I critique it. Yeah, so I'm quite like finicky about that. And I was making videos and things like that, and especially around interviewing comedians. So I think that that fed into what I do now.
Mm-hmm. I am suddenly more self-conscious about this entire interview. It is hilarious.
No, you're doing great. Don't worry, I'm not judging you at all.
No, it's fine. It's okay if you are. I'm okay with the judgment. I can handle it. So
this is a podcast kind of thing, so it's a conversation, right? It's very different to the 90-second flash interviews that I do at Intel Extreme Masters, for example.
Yeah, I understand that. So kind of one of the things that looking at getting into the scene and being in the scene and having this different style, do you think that your BBC training is a huge influence on the way that you do your hosting, or does it come more to your like personality?
It's a mixture of both, but yeah, the BBC training is definitely a big impact on it, because I have got a big personality, and I think sometimes it maybe makes people think that I'm not serious, but actually, when you look at the content of my questions, then actually I am. Yeah. So I think, my BBC background definitely influenced me, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned kind of looking at mistakes of other people. What do you think is one of the biggest mistakes people tend to make in those shortest interviews that people can correct?
Not mistakes. Oh my God. No, I don't look at other hosts and things and think mistakes. I just think different. Okay. I think let's I look at myself. I look at myself and I critique things that I'm doing, like saying basically too much. I personally, when I'm hosting, when I'm doing interviews, I don't tend to say I don't tend to say and when I'm interviewing. I breathe through it, which is why sometimes words come out a bit more elongated, or I sort of might seem like I'm pausing or going slowly. A part of that is also because I'm often interviewing people whose first language isn't English. Sometimes my interview will be taken by a Chinese language desk or a Russian language desk. So I need them to be able to translate as well. Even though I want things to be punchy. So I'm trying to keep the question as short and concise as possible. At the moment, I have this habit of leaning on the word because, which I'm not happy with. I say basically a lot, not as much as I used to, but in my podcast at the moment, I'm saying basically a lot. So I listen back and I watch back what I do, and I pick up on it. So I know what I'm doing that's not ideal at the moment. Like my stage hosting is not where I want it to be. It's getting there. I think with Counter-Strike, it's just letting go of gameplay when I walk on stage and more thinking about significance. I hold on to asking about gameplay because I'm so conscious of the fact that people think I don't play Counter-Strike and I don't know what I'm talking about. And that's my weakness, is worrying that the content is giving something negative away about myself, and I need to have more confidence in that. So that's definitely something I pick on myself about, I would say. But I don't tend to kind of look at other people who do what I do and go, oh my God, they're not very good. I don't do that. I promise. I don't have time to watch what other people are doing at the moment. I have to concentrate on myself and make myself better.
Yes, I think that is. I apologize for my poor phrasing of questions.
No, it's all right. I do it. I would do it with the TV though. So I've said basically again. I would do it with the TV, watching shows, or watching. To be honest, when I thought about hosting and things, I'd watch show reels from people who are doing all right in the UK, not in esports. And I watch it and I'd be like, I'm better than that. I'm better than they are. Which was really weird for me. But I was going, I'm better than they are, but there's no way for me to do what they're doing. Like, and I hate that, because I know it sounds really arrogant, but I know that I can do my job. Therefore, like, I feel okay to say that I'm not better than everyone. There are way better people than me out there, and they're really good inspiration, I'd say.
What do you think is the job of an interviewer with those 90 seconds? What do you think is your main purpose going out there?
It depends on the tournament organizer. Different shows have different tones. for me, it's to tell the story of the player and to tell the story of what happened in that game. So if I'm doing interviews between maps in Counter-Strike, then I need to try and capture what happened, what went right or what went wrong, and then reflect on what's going to happen in the next map, or try and get a sense of what the next map will be like for that team. If the analyst desk want to talk about anything in particular and they've given me a heads up, then I want to give my question towards that, because I need to give the analyst desk something to talk about if I can.
Yeah.
So for me, I want what is discussed in the interview to line up with what the desk is doing. I think in esports we can do that better. So I want to try and work on that going into next year. I think it's telling a story. The thing is, the analyst desk can break down what happened in game. I can therefore get a player to verify if that was true or not. I can ask them who made the decision. I can ask them what was going through their brain with their play, or I can ask them what happened for them in the round. But we don't have telestration. We don't have a replay during that interview. You can do that during the LEC actually, because they actually have a massive screen that behind you can replay a moment on, which is really cool. They have so much at their fingertips there in terms of stats and resource and things like that. So they can really elevate an interview there, which is super cool. Like Law is an amazing interviewer as well. So it's a really good team. But with the interviews I do, sometimes I'm told you've got 1 minute. I don't have it.
That's like
I
one
have
question.
Very little time. So yeah, exactly. And I'm the one thing. So we mentioned the BBC interview training earlier. One of the things that I got from that is the active listening. I'm not a slave to the questions I've prepared. I will have just really listen closely. It might not even be something they say. It might be the tone that they say it in. So I'm looking for that moment that I can like build on or ask more about. And if I've only got 1 minute, I can't necessarily do that. And I don't want to give my floor manager a heart attack by asking more. So that's hard to be disciplined about not going on longer.
Do you wish that there was more time for stage interviews? Because a minute seems extremely short. Or do you think that's fine? It's a minute is a minute, and I can make this work, and it's not a big deal.
Well, that sideline interviews, it's nice to have longer. Like, nice to have 2 minutes. But at the same time, I want it to be dynamic. I want it to be to the point, and I want it to be of the moment. So I don't want them to be too long. Stage interviews shouldn't be too long, because if you're doing a winner's interview and they're raising the trophy, you want to get their reaction and you want to find out what it means. And maybe you want to find out more about what happened that made them, what gave them the edge and got them to the moment where they could lift the trophy. But you don't want to bring the hype down by going on too long. You don't have the intimacy that you do on the sidelines. And that's what I'm getting to grips with. Because I've done a couple of winners interviews really where there was a bigger crowd, Chicago and Malmo. Malmo, the audience hadn't been like super loud during the event, and when Fnatic won, it was crazy. And I stupidly went in with a gameplay question and I messed it up. I forgot what map I was talking about because I didn't want to take cue cards. I threw the cue card away before I went out there, because again, it's that being in the moment type of thing. But I decided to ask about it, messed up the map, and then JW was like, do you mean this? And I was like, talking about the overtime. Only one map went time. So I just went, you know what I'm talking about, JW. Because I just but I think the audience forgave me for that, because we were all very emotional. This was a huge story, and I've never had an audience where, or at least I didn't know that I could talk to the audience as well as the interviewee in that winner's interview. I think if I tried it, I could have probably done that with Chicago, but I didn't know it at the time. And with Chicago, Liquid had already won like 4 events before it. So the storyline wasn't the same as winning in Cologne, even though I would argue Intel Extreme Masters is just as important. Yeah. But Cologne's Cathedral Counter-Strike. They were so used to winning by that point. That was a harder one in a way to do. So yeah, I've learned a lot more about stage interviews, but they're still the scariest thing to me. Stage is really scary. It was really scary. I can't lie. I want to do more of it. I want to be better at it. But that is that's the role where, when you mention about like my 15-year-old self saying I can't do it, I don't see why anyone would want me to host a stage when you could have OJ Borge do it, or you could have DX Master do it. You know, for me, or Golden Boy, like for me, when it comes to me stage hosting, it's always because I'm filling in for someone. I had to get that out of my brain for Chicago because it was very last minute. I wasn't meant to stage host it. OJ had a family emergency. It was a last minute thing. DreamHack Masters, I'm an interviewer, and then I go on stage during the weekend. Like, I wasn't meant to in Dallas, and then I ended up doing it. And then they got me to do it in Malmo. And that was when I was like, okay, you've been asked to do this because they want you to do it. So we're going to do it. And that was really fun. Like, that was fun. I planned my outfits really carefully. I was like, walked out on stage every time. I was just like, yeah, okay, this is my role, so I'm going to do it. In Chicago was nice because I got to talk to the audience beforehand and like do a little bit of warm up and all that kind of stuff. And the stuff that I do off camera that the audience sees in the arena but doesn't see at home, I want to be able to actually do that where the audience at home sees it, because I have a much more intimate relationship with the crowd than the audience at home gets to see. A lot more. I go up, I talk to people in the crowd, off microphone as well. I'll go and talk to them in person. I'll come out and I'll try and see as many people as possible because I want to thank them for being there, because it's a big deal. Some people travel a long way. Yeah. They give up a lot of their time. They make the show what it is. They add to the atmosphere. They support the players. They help the players play better. So I want to go and meet those people because we wouldn't have as special an experience for everyone without them.
Mm-hmm. So I actually want to talk a little about something that's pretty old and controversial, but I have, I think, a unique perspective on it. And it was when kind of Monty mentioned like the feelings question and brought up like the idea of that. I don't personally like the how does that make you feel question. I think that's because I don't like it also really in like therapy either. I think it's a lot of times it's not a very useful question. I think that's where, because I obviously have a background in psychology and I owned a counseling firm for a while before I worked in esports. And so like for me, like that question is kind of iffy in general, but I do think that a lot of times it is the objective of the interview to get emotional content out there. I don't know if necessarily that's the best feeling. Why do you think people are so against this idea of getting feelings? Or do you think it's just some sort of weird stigma that maybe people ask that question too much?
It's just the latter. I think people think it's asked too much. For me, I think the question is relevant if you're putting things into context. Yeah. I don't tend to ask, how do you feel much in sideline at all? But on stage, I might ask it. For me, I can't remember exactly what I said to Brolin. I was about to say, we young Fnatic player. Brolin, he won DreamHack Malmo. He won with a CT. He won with a pistol. Like, he basically won that round for his team. He won that series and that trophy for his team. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Going out and winning your first trophy at home. I can put that into perspective for that player, and then I can go, so what does that mean? Or like, how does it feel? I want that from them. So I think it is relevant. I think it's a fair question to ask. I think that the argument that I'm sick of this question, that ignores how that question can be used. Yes. I don't think. I like Monty a lot though, so I think it's absolutely fine to express that. Yeah. Just because I didn't necessarily agree with it doesn't mean it's not right in some cases. And what hurt me when I started out actually was people saying, "Oh, she just asked the same questions, or she just asked yes/no questions. She asked this, something other," and people like saying stuff that wasn't actually true about the questions I was asking. So, I understand where he was coming from as well. Yeah. I don't think it was the worst thing in the world to tweet, but I do think that question has a place as long as it's in context.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also I know a lot of people have an issue with like differing opinions. That's not something that I've really, I think, struggled with, just because of maybe the people that I've worked with, some extreme people. So like getting different opinions is just something that you kind of get used to, I think. And do you think that people have a hard time with this? Like people who just have opposite opinions kind of getting along? And maybe it's because the internet in general is like I think it maybe goes back to that screen thing. Like if you're talking in person, I don't know how often people are as aggressive as they would be otherwise. But it seems like, especially in esports, if you have a different opinion, a lot of times people just attack you rather than actually try to have a discussion.
I think it's because it's on the internet, isn't it? For the most part, those discussions, people aren't attacking each other behind the scenes or in person. It's just because people want to be heard, and I think people think that the best way to be heard maybe is to be very like, this is my opinion, and so that's why I write my blog rather than tweeting stuff sometimes, because then I can actually express why I feel that way and etc. Like, because I think that's a better way to do it. I don't want to have arguments with people. I do sometimes shut people down, say it's on my Twitch chat or on Reddit, for example, and things like that. Or sometimes, I know people I work with want me to like just completely ignore them entirely. So sometimes I do that, but I also think that things don't change if you don't call people out. So I make a decision whether to engage or whether not to. And I don't really get shit on my Twitter, to be honest. I'm very lucky. People don't come to me to be horrible to me. And if someone's a dick on my Instagram, I just delete the comment. Same on my YouTube. YouTube, I probably engage with people a bit too much in some of the comments, but now I've just get rid of those. Or I queue them, so they have to be approved first. So that's easy. It's harder on Reddit. But Reddit is a much warmer, friendlier place right now for me, anyway. So it's not so much of an issue. And what I notice is often if a comment is not nice, then it tends to get filtered out. So you have to expand it to read the nastiness. Yeah. The moderation on the whole is pretty good there. It's very good actually. But yeah, I don't have to face it too much. It's good. Yeah, it's fine.
So the next question I'm going to ask you, and this one is going to be a harder one. If you don't want to talk about it, it's okay.
Okay.
So you have experienced suicide in your life, like people who have committed suicide and getting passed away. How do you go through that? Because you lost one of your good friends, Ben. And it is pretty traumatic when that happens, and it's kind of unexplainable, speaking from experience myself. How did you kind of work through it? What was it like for you, and how do you get to a point where you're okay with everything going on?
Well, oh God.
It's okay.
I think I don't think you ever, I think a great thing, I think it depends on the person, right? I think with Ben, it's just, I knew him through my boyfriend and my boyfriend's friends, and I'd been on holiday with him literally said goodbye to him on the train, and he was gone the next day, like when we flew back to fucking Luton Airport, which is the world's worst airport. One of the worst. And it was worse for my friends who'd known him for years than it was for me. Like, he'd just asked my boyfriend to be his best man. So for me, it was amazing in a way to see that community that formed. We still have a WhatsApp group about Ben, where we just post things that we think he would have found funny because he was a real character. So I think that Keanu Reeves quote on that chat show.
Oh, you're wonderful. That one?
No, not that one. He says, what happens after you die? And Keanu says, I think that the ones who love us will miss us. I think that's what he says. I think it was on John Oliver. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, maybe. Or I can't remember the one. I can see the chat show in my mind, but I can't remember who it is. But yeah, so it was really hard. But I think you were so grateful that you knew that person. So you can't ask questions about why. I remember going to work the next day and I couldn't be there. And my friend now was like, just said, well, they chose to leave. So that was a way of putting it. Doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it much more, you kind of sort of change your perspective on it. I'm just really lucky because I haven't lost anyone like that. And I was literally talking to Ben over the fucking weekend in Italy and saying I'm really fortunate because people from my sister's school who are she took the 13+, she went to the school that I chose not to go to. and she was with had borders. There was a lot more privileged people there who went on exotic holidays and who died in skiing accidents or minibus crashes in Barbados. So she had experienced that, and I hadn't, and I haven't really since. But I remember it wasn't suicide, but I remember being in Chicago and hearing it about In Control dying, and just that was I didn't really know Jeff. I met him a few times and he was a lovely person, but he had so much influence. And I just can't imagine what it was like. Well, in fact, no, I can imagine a bit what it was like for the people around him, because it was a shock. It was sudden, right? It doesn't matter how someone died, really. It's the fact that they did and they shouldn't have. I know that's a really basic, ineloquent way of putting it. But yeah, every wedding, every birthday meal where we're all together, every Glastonbury, like there is going to be an empty space where Ben should be. But it's also amazing because there are really good moments where you celebrate that you had that person as well.
What do you recommend people do if they lose someone who's important to them? Because obviously a lot of people can shut away and do stuff like that, which is not what I would recommend. What would you say if you're out there and you've lost someone important to you? What message would you want to give them?
I would find other people that person was important to as well, because then you find someone who's going through what you're going through. I think that's the only thing I can recommend, really. I remember at the time, because for me, it was like, someone had to remind me that it was my loss as well, but I wasn't his fiance. I wasn't his best friend like my boyfriend was. I hadn't been at uni with him. So for me, the way that I kind of, in a way, sort of cope with that situation was by looking after other people. So I made myself busy in a different way, and also I suddenly had to plan a show, and I had 2 weeks to do it. I had to plan like nearly 50 hours of content, which was very last minute and would have been hard even if we hadn't suddenly lost my friend. So yeah, I think I don't know if being busy is the best way, but like certainly finding other people who understand how you feel is really important, I think.
I think that's really good advice to get. Find other people that you can be there for and that can be there for you. Yeah. Because I think that's a crucial aspect of it, is kind of doing it. So I want to kind of jump a little bit happier, because I don't want to, I'm sorry for the emotions. It's part of the show. Yeah. I apologize. Looking at kind of a support network in esports. One of the things that you actually mentioned is your boyfriend being there. What's it like traveling all the time, but always knowing that you have a wonderful support system back home that is always going to be there for you? How important is that for you in your job?
Really important. I'm really lucky. I'm lucky that I've come into this older with that foundation there, with the house. I feel terribly guilty that we're renovating and I'm there most of the time. So that's harder, but I've got something to go back to, and that's really great. I'm very fortunate in that sense. And my boyfriend never makes me feel bad about the fact that I'm away a lot. Sometimes I'm literally here for less than 24 hours and then I go again. I've missed lots of things, lots of events. We haven't been on holiday together properly for a very, very long time. And yeah, I think that's the one bugbear. We need to sort my dates out early. I really there are a couple of TOs who are trying to book me for things right now, and I'm very grateful to them. I just wish they'd all come at once so I could then choose what I'm doing. But that's very selfish on my part, because I need to work at the dates that we can actually go away. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really good. I think it keeps me grounded. I think I'd probably go wild if I didn't. I wasn't wild at uni. I was working when I wasn't doing my degree, doing the work experience, doing radio, doing writing, everything. Then I never went home, never moved home apart from maybe 4 days when I came back from Newcastle. I lived at my mum's house for nearly a week, and then I went again. So I was never wild. I was always saving for the house and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think that if I didn't have that foundation, now I'm in this world of where, you know, there's often after parties and you're going around the world and seeing new places and stuff. Yeah, I'd probably be a lot more hungover a lot more often.
Fair. One of the things I wanted to kind of ask you about, because you mentioned being at home and then work and taking all these jobs for talent. And when I had Anders Bloom on the show, it's something we actually talked about. And he mentioned how sometimes it's terrifying not to take jobs, because if you don't take jobs, then other people get those roles and they might just start hiring those people instead of you. Is that something that you're terrified for, and why you keep such a booked schedule? Because your schedule is insanely booked.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm still, for me, like, last year was kind of my rookie year. This is my big year of doing Counter-Strike. So I've done 18 events this year in Counter-Strike. I've got one more coming up. And so, yeah, it is scary not taking gigs. I have turned down a few things because of family stuff, but I don't turn down much, especially not with Counter-Strike. So, yeah, it is scary. I need to find more of a balance. You know, choosing one thing over another is really hard as well. Maybe I need to branch out in other games. Like, the guys in CS do say to me, like, you have the benefit of being able to do other games, but trying to find the time to learn a new game, because I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about. I can't talk about it if I don't know what I'm talking about, right? So I'm not a bullshitter. I work extremely hard to do what I do and to do it well. So, like, I just stage hosted Clash of Clans. It's a one Hamburg, and I am still playing it just in case I do some more next year. Like, I will play the games. So yeah, it's, for me, it's important. Also, I need to, with renovating a house, and I'm not going to get to do this for long, because what if I do have a kid? I'm 30, so I want to do as much as I can while I still can. I want to see the world. I want to work with people, and, you know, so it's hard for me to take a break, definitely.
Okay. So, believe it or not, I only have one question for you left. It's been an emotional ride. I know. Yeah, we're good. This feels like a good point. Okay. I wanted to end on some happier questions. So, this is arguably the hardest question, depending on the situation. I know, right? Like, you're like, oh my God, some of the questions have already been kind of hard to talk. Having had the experience been on the show, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, then, I mean, too bad. I'm sorry. You're good. So good. Having had the experience being on the show, if you could see anyone in kind of like the media industry, so YouTube, Twitch, esports, they don't need to be directly in front of the camera. They can be behind the scenes as well. Who would you like to see on this show?
Oh, I like Chain Reaction. That's a BBC show. Anyone?
Yep.
I want to go esports.
You can give me a couple people if you want. If you say someone who I've had, I will let you know. But
I want you to have Gabe Newell from Valve, and I want you to ask him what the fuck Half-Life 3 is. Okay. Do you want to give a second one just in case? Because I'm just throwing that out there. Who else? Let me think. See, there are lots of people I need to have on my bloody podcast, man, but I'm really bad at asking to be on them. So I really respect the fact you go out there and ask. I would love to hear Dagny Weinberg, who is from DreamHack, and she is an incredible producer. And she often produces some of the DreamHack Opens. She produced the DreamHack Open Valencia, which was the women's tournament with a $50,000 prize pool. Or was it $100,000 and the winners got $50,000? I can't remember, but she's a fucking legend, and she has lots of ideas about the industry. She taught me a lot, and I love working with her. She's a big inspiration to me, so I'd love to hear more from her.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Frankie. If you have any shout outs or anything you want to give, now is the time for you to plug anything and everything you want to plug.
Woo! Okay.
So have at it.
Twitch is Frankie. I'll be playing CS on there a lot. But I play other games. I do Just Dance sometimes. I do Twitch things. I have sponsorships from Intel and Omen, so sometimes I'll be doing content for them as well. A big thanks to my sponsors, by the way. They're fucking amazing. Oh, I shouldn't say that when I'm talking about a sponsor, swearing, but they're the coolest. And then what else? I'll podcast My Life in Pixels. Twitter is Get Frank, and then Instagram is Get Frank Games. I know there's lots of pictures of my face. It's what does well in terms of likes. The funny thing with Instagram is I don't see it like. I think there's a lot of talk with Instagram about being like damaging, which kind of like valuing people's likes and all that kind of stuff. For me, like, I know I took a picture in front of a window. I know I don't look as good in the other light. All that kind of stuff. I don't care. It's a game, man. I like seeing what content as well. Doesn't mean that I feel like I'm ugly just because one posted less than another. I went to put a picture with the dog up and I was like, this is going to go so well. It's me and a flipping dog. Didn't. Took a picture a few days later with the same bloody dog. Better lighting, slight different like composition. Did so much better. I was like, okay, right. Now I know. Now I know what I did wrong with that photo. So like, I actually really like the game of Instagram, but I think I'm quite fortunate that I've started growing on Instagram since turning 29, 30, so I don't use it to value my self-worth, which is quite nice.
That's fair. Anything else?
Yeah, I thought I'd always do a really long caveat with it. No, I think that's everything. My blog is getfrank.co.uk, so if you want to read thoughts on things, yeah, you can see my nuanced use inverted comments. You can see my explanations to things about language because I'm quite passionate about that, and yeah, that's where you kind of figure out my life story.
Thank you so much, Frankie. For everyone out there that's spinning the minds of media, my name is Blake Penshevs. We appreciate Frankie being on the show. For everyone out there, I hope you have a wonderful day.